Hello, I'm Shamshay. Welcome back to my channel Mako English. Today we are going to talk about one of the greatest authors of the Romantic era, John Keats. John Keats was born on 31st of October 1795 at Swan and Hope livery stable in Moore's Land in the city of London. This stable belonged to John Jennings. John Jennings had a daughter, Frances Jennings. John Keats' father, Thomas Keats, married Frances Jennings in 1794. Soon after the marriage, the Jennings decided to move to a nearby village, Ponderch End. At that time, he took over the business. The business was thriving well, so the family did well from the very beginning. Within 3 years of inheriting the business, he bought a house at 12 Cavan Street and the family moved in there. It was really a good period for the family. The three of the siblings of John Keats was born. Their names were George Keats, Tom Keats and Fanny Keats. When Keats was 8 years old, he was sent to Enfield's Academy to pursue his primary education along with his brother as a boarding student. Although Enfield's Academy was a small school of 75 students, its headmaster had a good reputation and the school was renowned throughout the region. It was really a great period for the young poet John Keats. In 1804, John Keats' father Thomas Keats visited them at Enfield's Academy, and later in the evening, while he was returning home, he met with an accident and his horse fell. His head hit on the pavement and the skull was broken. He bled profusely. The next day he died of the wounds. It was a great blow to the family. John Keats thought he was responsible behind his father's death. His mother, Frances Jennings, had no knowledge of how to run the business, even though the business was thriving well. It was really a painful period for the family. The family, which was suffering from the personal loss, also suffered financially. So, when William Rawlings approached Keats' mother and asked her to marry him, she agreed, and he promised her that he is going to take care of her 4 kids as well as the business. From the very beginning, Mrs. Jennings disapproved of the idea and she said that Rawlings was merely a fortune hunter and he is after her money. Her apprehension really proved right. Only 6 months after the marriage collapsed and they got divorced. It was really a huge setback to the family because family lost everything. And the rule was that women had no property rights. So William Rawlings kept everything and she was penniless. After that she went missing, only to come back to the family in 1809. While she returned to the family, she was suffering from tuberculosis, or the consumption as it was called at that time. It was a disease which had no cure. While she was suffering from tuberculosis, John Keats and George Keats regularly nursed her and they took care of her. She died in the mid-March 1810. It was the huge blow to the family and John Keats really felt that he was alone in this world. After Mrs. Jennings' husband's death, Mrs. Jennings contacted her family friend Richard Abbey to take care of the kids and he appointed him their guardian. He allowed John Keats to stay 1 more year at the Enfield's Academy. After that, he guided the young poet that he should join the Dr. Hammond at Enfield where his grandmother stayed. According to Richard Abbey's plan, he left Enfield's Academy and went to Edmonton. Dr. Hammond was a surgeon and the young poet had to learn how to set bones, how to pull teeth, and apothecary. It was really a painful period for the poet, but we know little about it because at that time the poet stopped talking about the miseries incurred to him. We know little what happened at that time, but we certainly know that when he had time, he rushed to Charles Cowden Clarke at Anfield, and the visits were frequent. While he was studying there, he never lost his interest in poetry. Poetry was a galvanizing force behind him, and he pursued the dream of becoming a poet, and it was forever with him. We know that when he returned to Charles Cowden Clarke, and he discussed poetry at that time, and Charles Cowden Clarke introduced him many of the classical authors. Once he finished the apprenticeship there, he went to the Guy's Hospital, and he had to complete 1 year's degree there, and Dr. Ashley Cooper was the surgeon under whom he had to learn surgery. At that time, surgery was a painful business because there was no anesthetics. They were cut, they cried like the hell, and young poet felt miserable at that time. Even though we know that he hated the apothecary, he was still able to complete his degree. Once he completed his degree, he was free to do whatever he wanted since he was just short of 21. So Mr. Keats had enough time to do whatever he wanted. He went to Margaret. Margaret was a beautiful place with natural vividity. It was a place which filled the poet with charm, and he thought the place was conducive to his art. He regularly visited the sea. It was really a mesmerizing experience for the poet. Before finishing his degree, he had his first poem published in the Examiner. The magazine was run by Charles Cowden's friend Leigh Hunt. It was a huge achievement for the young poet. While he returned from Margate, he went directly to Charles Cowden Clarke. They both read together Chapman's translation. After that, he produced his poem called On First Looking into Chapman's Homer. It got published in December 1816. It was when this poem got published that he met Leigh Hunt. Leigh Hunt was really a generous person, and he always supported the emerging personalities, and they became firm friends. He loved to stay with him at Vale of Health in Hampstead. He was staying with his wife at that time, and Leigh Hunt really admired the personality of John Keats, and they became firm friends, and he started visiting this place. He really liked this place a lot because it was a countryside, and John Keats stayed for many days with the family. It is here that he met the greatest poets of that time, Percy Shelley and John Reynolds. They really got impressed by the beauty and charm of John Keats, and they liked him a lot. He became firm friend to John Reynolds, and his parents really liked John Keats a lot, and he visited his house many times. While he was staying at Leigh Hunt's home, he also met Benjamin Haydon. Benjamin Haydon was a painter. He was painting historical canvases. Although his canvases did not sell well, he had a charming personality, and because of it, he won many personalities, including Wordsworth. It was he who introduced the young poet to Wordsworth at a dinner party called the Mortal Dinner, which was organized to commemorate his painting The Christ's Entry to Jerusalem. The next year, his collection of poems, named Poems, got published. It was Leigh Hunt who helped him to publish those poems. It didn't sell well, but the luck was still with him. Another publisher, John Taylor, contacted the young poet and agreed to buy all the unsold copies of the poem, and he also handed him £20. It was a great act of faith, and the collection of poems got published in the same year. While Tom was suffering from the tuberculosis at that time, three boys got settled into Walk in Hampstead, thinking that country air would be good for Tom. But John Keats didn't stay there for long. He went to Isle of Wight because John Keats has taken the biggest challenge in his life. He was writing Endymion. It was about classical mythology and it was really difficult to read. But Isle of Wight didn't suit him. He returned to Margate, but at that time he found it really difficult for him to start the poem. So he again returned to his brothers at Hampstead and he started writing the poem there. Within 6 months he completed the poem, and he completed the poem on 28th November 1817. Later on he revised this poem and this poem got published in 1818. While the poem Endymion got published, critics attacked the young poet severely. They said that it was not his business. He would better return to apothecary rather than writing poems. Some of them even dubbed him as Cockney poet. It was a derogatory term at that time, and John Keats really got hurt. He suffered a lot because of these harsh words. Still, he achieved many things. One of them was that he never felt the dearth of ideas again in his life, and again it didn't sell well. John Keats met Joseph Severn in 1816, and in 1818 Joseph Severn made the portrait of the young poet. It was one of the few portraits ever made during the life of the young poet. By mid-March, the young poet John Keats moved to Teignmouth in Devon, where his brothers were staying. At that time, Tom was suffering with tuberculosis. When George married Georgiana, he asked his brothers that they wanted to move to America. Tom said that he was okay now. On that promise, the couple moved to America. At the same time, John Keats went on a tour of Scotland with his friend Charles Brown. The tour lasted for 43 days. They both covered many places, and the natural landscape was really enthralling for the young poet. But by the end of the tour, young poet fell ill and it was impossible for him to continue the tour, so he returned to his brother. When he returned, he was writing his masterpiece Hyperion. When he returned, he found that Tom was suffering from the disease heavily, so he nursed him and continued writing in between. It was really a painful period for the young poet. On 1st December 1818, John Keats' brother Tom Keats died. After the death of John Keats' brother, he moved to Wentworth Place, where his friend Charles Brown lived. Here he produced many of the masterpieces. It was a period of his poetic outburst. He produced many poems here. Here he met Fanny Brawne. He fell in love with her as soon as he saw her. His love story continued and he wrote many letters to Fanny Brawne. By the end of 1819, they got engaged. It was really a great period for the author. He was enjoying his life. He had everything he wanted. But again, he felt disappointed when In February, he met with his first hemorrhage. It was a powerful hemorrhage. By the end of the day, he had his second hemorrhage, more powerful than the first. When he got his first hemorrhage, he instantly knew that his death was about to come. Since he was a doctor, he can easily distinguish the arterial blood from other blood. He informed Fanny that it was better for her to forget about him, but she rejected his proposal. The doctor advised it would be better that Fanny's visits to the young poet should be curtailed, and on that advice, John Keats moved to his friend Leigh Hunt. After that, the visits became less and less frequent, so it created the alienation. But still, Fanny Brown kept loving him. She stayed a bachelor till she was 33. By the end of the summer, the situation got worse, and the doctor advised that only a summer in Italy could save his life. So Joseph VII took him to Italy. They sailed for 6 weeks, and while he reached in Rome, he was already 25. They hired a room in Rome. Joseph VII portrayed him while the young poet was lying on his bed. Before his death, he informed some of his friends as well as Joseph VII that there should be no name on his tombstone, only the inscription that here lies one whose name was written on water. He died on February 23rd, 1821. Though he died nameless, still his contribution to the literature is known throughout the world. He is going to stay as an inspiring figure for the generations to come.